Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I went back up to the house and I was yelling and screaming for my mom. I yelled and screamed, "Mom, Dad."
The ashes settled, the devastation now setting in. We hear from a man who escaped the fire in Lytton, but his parents did not. An unknown number of people still unaccounted for. Also, from the north to the south, more than 1,000 homes are under evacuation order across the province tonight. All eyes turning to the weather this weekend. And
so I had the passports and all of our documentation in my purse, ready to rock and roll.
Which way are we going to go?
how do you prepare for when a fire comes knocking? We tell you what you need to know and what you need to pack.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Anita is away tonight. I'm Tanya Fletcher. 2 people have been reported dead tonight amid the devastation of the Lytton wildfire, part of a personal tragedy that one man barely survived. Jeff Chapman says he watched as the flames took the lives of both of his parents. Our Susanna De Silva spoke with him today, and she begins our coverage from near Lytton again tonight. So, Susanna, what's the update from where you are today?
Well, you can see the wind is still blowing again here today, and you can see the large plumes of smoke behind me. The fire has moved up the hill and over it, away from Lytton, but it is still burning. 40 properties north of this fire have also been placed on evacuation alert tonight, and these are all conditions that authorities say make it too dangerous to go in to see who is still unaccounted for. But one man I did speak to shared his tragic story of being sure that his parents were lost.
Please help my mom and dad and my brother and my animals. Please.
A video message Jeff Chapman recorded in case he didn't make it.
I just can't get it out of my mind. I cannot get it out of my mind.
Chapman was getting ready for dinner with his parents when they spotted smoke. Minutes later, fire was all around them.
I finally got one little spot fire out, and then this one started, and now our shed's on fire. The shed went up, and then there's a big tree above our house, and it candled. As soon as that candled, the whole house went up. Like the time I knew that I seen smoke and knew there was trouble, I don't even think it was 10 minutes.
And by that point, he says they were surrounded. His parents, including his father, who had trouble walking, wouldn't get far, he realized, so he got them to take shelter in a recently dug trench.
I was always told, get down low as you can. I said, Mom, get down. And she went down in. My dad come out, and he says, where's your mom? He's down in the hole, and everything's just going right up. So my dad went down in there, and there just happened to be a piece of tin or something there, and I slid it over, and I almost went in with them. I hesitated, and I was not enough room, and I pulled the piece of sheet over, and I ran.
The only spot he could think of that wouldn't burn was the gravel on the nearby railway tracks. He lay there for 45 minutes waiting out the fire.
Oh my God. I went back up to the house, and I was yelling and screaming for my mom. I yelled and screamed, "Mom, Dad," and I came up and I seen what was left of my mom.
He says a power line had come down on them. When he realized there was nothing he could do, he got in his truck and fled.
We just trying to save what we worked our whole life for. You know, we're just trying to save what we worked for to have. You know, it might not have been the best, but it was home.
He is still waiting for authorities to find his parents.
They've been there for 2 days. You know, I know the fire is still burning around, but how hard can it be to go in and, you know, it's not like we don't know where they are.
The coroner's office says it has spoken to Chapman, but it's not safe to enter the village.
There's a lot of potential hazards there at the moment, dangerous chemicals, gases in particular, so it is definitely not a safe site at this time.
They're still laying out there, and that's the hardest part, knowing that.
Now, he says he wanted to speak out to make sure people understood the human toll that these fires are taking. And while he says he doesn't blame anyone, understands that nothing could have been done that day to prevent what happened that day, he does wonder if perhaps more could have been done before that fire occurring. And he also wants to know what caused it. Tanya?
Susie, thank you so much. Our Susanna De Silva from just outside of Lytton tonight. A couple from Lytton has learned that every single building on their 32-acre farm has been destroyed, but some of their animals did make it out alive.
We got a phone call that they found 3 of our 4 adult dogs, 6 of the 9 puppies, and about 4 or 5 of our sheep and one of our alpacas. And at that point, I lost it, and I couldn't stop crying. I was just so relieved that by some miracle they had made it through.
Tricia Thorpe says the fire moved so fast she and her husband were forced to leave their animals and everything else behind. They fled to Lillooet, but then had to move again because of a new evacuation order. They're now in Peachland with her sister. Well, meanwhile, officials are keeping a close watch on a wildfire that's burning out of control near Kamloops. The Sparks Lake fire has grown exponentially since Monday. Last night, several smaller fires were sparked following a spectacular and scary round of lightning. That prompted the evacuation of hundreds of homes. The CBC's Brady Strachan is there with the latest.
And this whole area lit up orange last night.
Dave Kelly says it was an incredibly close call. He and others in this Kamloops neighborhood watched in horror as lightning strikes ignited dry sagebrush and grass just over the ridge behind their homes late Thursday evening.
This could have been a tragedy which would have exceeded Lytton if we had not been really lucky, because the winds were really going, and if they hadn't changed directions, we could have lost Juniper and Valley View.
After several days of record-breaking temperatures, the Kamloops area was pounded with lightning strikes, and then the winds picked up.
Oh, there's even more smoke is now.
Oh yeah, it's flaring up right there.
Right there.
Rachel Holty and her family packed their belongings into their car, preparing to flee.
I knew we would be okay. I knew we would get out together no matter what happened, but it's just terrifying to, think of the damage and what could have happened.
Authorities ordered evacuations of the Valley View and Juniper Ridge neighborhoods, sending hundreds of families scrambling to leave the area. However, rain, a shift in the winds, and the quick work of firefighters extinguished the immediate threat of the fire, and residents were able to return home last night. The fire is still burning, however, and by midday today, smoke and ash came billowing up into the sky again. Fire crews hit the blaze from the ground and from the air. Mayor Ken Christian says this is no time to be complacent.
We have to look out for fires, and we have to look out for our neighbors, and we have to just be extra vigilant.
Temperatures are expected to remain in the mid to high 30s for the next week, and with no sign of significant rain in the forecast, people in this neighborhood could be on edge for some time. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kamloops.
Well, the BC Wildfire Service says 136 active fires are burning across the province this hour. 9 of them are a major cause for concern. The fires span from the Peace region in the north to the Kootenays in the south. They've already burned a combined 60,000 hectares. As the CBC's Katie Nicholson tells us, people right across BC are on edge right now.
The roar of planes overhead cutting through the smoky sky. Below, bags are packed as fire once again threatens to move in on Kamloops. Just last night, 200 people were forced from their homes in this neighborhood.
That's Juniper.
Dante Tamada took that video.
Those flames were at least 40 feet high over the crest. It was, the kids were really worried, weren't you? You guys were really worried. They were pretty upset.
By all accounts, it was a close call.
If that fire had jumped over and lit up those trees, Juniper would be done just like Lytton was.
Those with homes have one set of problems, but plans are being made to make sure the most vulnerable also have a means of escape.
We are still doing some groundwork to try and get those folks who have been sleeping outside, to come to the shelters so that they can be included in that evacuation when the time comes.
Hot, dry conditions have parched forests, trees now like kindling. 50% of fires in the province are started by lightning. Yesterday, there were 12,000 lightning strikes.
The way the forest floor is right now, potential for ignition due to lightning is very high. Like, we're talking in the 80s and the 90s for most of the Southeast fire centers.
And that means little relief from anxiety, especially for those in more remote areas like Deca Lake.
Worried. I got everything here. I could lose everything. I don't want to start over at 66 years old.
Gordon Weiss's precious belongings packed in boxes, ready to go.
That's a lifetime of, 46 years together, living together, right? That's our kids, that's our marriage, that's everything. All in these boxes. That's what counts.
That and a concrete plan of escape.
The CBC's Katie Nicholson reporting. And with thousands of residents displaced by the wildfires and more evacuations expected as lightning strikes continue to set them off, how can people facing the prospect of leaving their home prepare? Our Corey Correa is finding out.
Jake said it's coming this way, fast. Let's get out of here.
What do you do if a wildfire is knocking on your door and you have only minutes to prepare?
If you're fleeing your community, try and imagine that. There's only 3 ways out of Lytton, and so once you leave, where do you go? What have you left behind?
When flames threaten a community, residents are put on an evacuation alert. This means be ready to leave on short notice. Make sure your car has a full tank of gas and have a grab-and-go bag ready.
Some things that you might want to pack are your passport, your identification, food and water for yourself and your family for overnight or for a number of days, items that you might need for your pet.
It's also a good idea to remove flammable items like doormats and curtains. Connect your garden hose for firefighters, make sure your address is visible, and disconnect your garage door opener so it can be opened in case there's a loss of power.
If you're placed on evacuation order, the most important thing is that you leave as soon as possible to keep yourselves and those that you live with safe.
Those ordered to leave are urged to register all family members at the nearest reception center so officials know everyone is safe.
Any evacuee requiring immediate assistance with accommodations, food, medical, or prescription support should seek it at a local emergency social services reception center.
Like this one in Chilliwack, for those forced out of their homes by the Lytton fire.
Many people, of course, were unable to grab anything on their way out as the fire moved very quickly. So we connect them with those supplies, and we also connect them with any other supports that they may need, mental health support, medical support.
Evacuees are then dispersed to hotels or to stay with family or friends. They can go shopping for food and supplies and carry on with the recovery process.
When I got into the center, we didn't know what to expect, my husband and I, but we were treated and greeted very well. We felt respected and we felt dignity, so we felt good about coming.
Evacuees are encouraged to continually check for updates to find out when they can return home. Corey Correa, CBC News, Vancouver.
And let's bring in our meteorologist, Johanna Wagstaffe, who's watching the minute-by-minute conditions. And Joe, lightning strikes were once again sparking up new fires today across BC. So what are you seeing tonight?
That's right, Tanya. In the past sort of 6 to 12 hours, we have seen many new fire starts across the province because of those lightning strikes. BC wildfire officers trying to keep up with the information they're getting in, respond to those fires, and try and see if those lightning strikes are starting new fires that are fizzling out because they come with rain, or have to respond to them as they grow because of the winds. I want to show you the latest satellite and radar with the lightning. The main bulk of that little low pressure system that actually brought over 1,000 strikes to the Kamloops region last night, hundreds of strikes again to the southeast today. That is crossing the border. In fact, severe weather happening in through Calgary right now, but those lightning strikes are beginning to dissipate on our side of the border. You can see the latest fire danger rating today, and we did get some good rain. As we have heard throughout the show, some of these thunderstorms are coming with rain, which is helping the situation. But you can see in the southeast, through the Kootenays, a lot of pockets of high to extreme. And I just want to put this in context. Most of Western Canada now, you can see all of the red, experiencing these kinds of unprecedented fire conditions. So definitely watching for new fire starts, Tanya, through the overnight. And again, tomorrow afternoon, I'll take you through that forecast and talk more about the heat and the heat relief coming up.
Fingers crossed for more rain and less lightning. Thanks so much, Johanna. In other news today, RCMP are investigating two separate suspicious fires that broke out at an Anglican church, at two of them in the past 24 hours. One of those churches is in Tofino and was more than a century old. It was left with some damage, but is still standing. And a 108-year-old church was burned down late last night near New Hazelton. The former chief of Gitwangak says there were plans to restore the church after somebody had tried to set it on fire last week. Several churches across Canada have burned down over the past few weeks in the wake of anger over the recent discovery of unmarked graves near Catholic-run residential schools. Well, meanwhile, investigators on Vancouver Island say a fire that damaged a totem pole at the Malahat Lookout was deliberately set. Shawnigan Lake RCMP say a driver alerted them to the fire. By the time they arrived, the local fire department was already putting out the flames. Officers say the fire had the potential to start a forest fire. They've seized evidence from the scene and are looking to identify suspects. The investigation will look at whether this can be classified as a hate crime. And Victoria's statue of British explorer James Cook has been recovered from the waters of the harbour after it was toppled yesterday by Canada Day protesters. RCMP say based on graffiti found at both scenes, they believe this case and the totem pole fire are connected. Cook was one of several statues pulled down across the country yesterday. Protesters showing their frustration with colonial figures as more unmarked graves have been found near former residential schools. Victoria police are searching for suspects. And during the NHL playoffs on CBC, just a reminder of how and where you can watch the show. We'll be on every weekday at 6 p.m. online, streaming on CBC Gem, YouTube, and Facebook. And then we'll air after the hockey game each evening. Those times will vary depending on when the game starts and ends. You can always watch our show on demand, streaming at cbc.ca/BC. Coming up, we take you to Lower Post, where a former residential school has been demolished. How survivors are reacting next. And thank you for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Even though the worst of the heat wave has moved on from some parts of BC, temperatures are still soaring in Western Canada. And that can also make it challenging for furrier friends to stay cool. CBC producer Art Raham paid a visit to an animal sanctuary about 70 kilometers south of Edmonton to see what help animals there are getting to beat the heat.
Got a little bit of water in here. This is where our big pigs like to be. We would be best recognized as what people would call a funny farm, I guess. We have a couple roosters, our geese, we have goats, sheep, horses, mini donkeys, dogs, cats, potbelly pigs, and big swine pigs. You want to get up at all? So when it gets really hot like this, we like to make sure that everybody has access to fresh water all the time. And we set up extra kiddie pools and waiting areas for the animals to access. Some of our larger pigs, when they sit in the kiddie pools, they tend to break them because they're 1,000+ pounds. So we also dig large holes for them in the ground and then fill those mud holes with water. We also set up fans inside the shelters just to get lots of airflow going, and then a couple little lean-to areas so they can get out of the sun. The ones that I always worry about the most just are the pigs, because they also have to worry about getting sunburnt just because they're not covered in hair so much. So with our pigs, we like to make sure that they just have access to the mud so they can cover themselves up naturally and protect themselves from that sun. So we're doing our best to keep our residents nice and cool. We would very much appreciate if everybody is doing the same. So just be super careful, check on your animals' lots, make sure that they're getting lots of water and staying cool, and we'll all get through it together.
And stay with us. So when we come back, we'll take you up north all the way to the Alaska Highway, where a former residential school was demolished in northern BC this week. We'll bring you that story after the break. Welcome back. It has been an emotional week of remembrance for children who attended residential schools, but it was also empowering for some former students of one particular school in northern BC who saw the last standing building demolished this week. Our Gordon Lovren was there for the ceremony.
It was over quickly, but around 600 Indigenous people gathered next to the Liard River to witness an end to dark history for many of them.
This is about the survivors. It's really weird, because in 1970 I came here as an 8-year-old little boy with no love or nothing, you know. When I was scooped in 1966, I was the most vulnerable member of our nation. I'm not that vulnerable little boy any longer.
Peter Stone, George Miller, the late Gene Gleason, Fred Lutz, Walter Carlick, Debbie Rote, and Dave Porter. These men and women worked tirelessly for years to get rid of this building. And we did it.
But when Charlie Pete and Melvin Groot took me to the stairs to go into the basement, and Charlie could not descend those stairs, it became real. And when Melvin and I were standing in the basement of that building, and he told me his stories, it became real. Truth.
So as we destroy this colonial system, this building that represents the worst infliction of our Indigenous peoples, you, Casca brothers and sisters, you will build something better. We will come back better.
What was noticeable about this day was a lack of anger. I had come here believing the air would be heavy. However, the Tahltan, Tlingit, Casca, and Tagish people here were remarkably calm, and even the chief of the Liard First Nation brought his own brand of humor to this day.
I couldn't read. I didn't learn to read until I was 17. But I faked it till faked it till you make it. And also they probably wanted to just kick me out of school too.
The day ended with a look to the future as politicians and Casca children planted new trees at the site where a new multiplex building will be built. It will house a new community center, a gymnasium, cafeteria, a post office, and government services. A place for the community and its children to gather for generations to come. Gordon Lovren, CBC News, Lower Post, BC.
Here's a look at our local mountains. Nice to see some blue sky out there. The heat does continue for most of the province, and that fire danger is still imminent. Johanna will have your full forecast coming up next.
So much rain on the BC coast, it was bound to happen sooner or later. Instead of complaining about it, somebody has decided to bottle it and make money. A natural resource more abundant than trees and easier to find than oil or gas, and we get some more of it every 2 or 3 days. Actually, bottling Canadian water is nothing new. Jugs of water from BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec are sold in supermarkets across the country. But doing it on a grand scale is something new. If only there were a way to ship it down there. Well, now there is a plan to fill deep-sea tankers from this waterfall and sail south to Mexico. Bulk supplies of high-purity Canadian water for sale. The man behind the plan is Colin Beach of West Vancouver.
I think if there's a demand for water and it can be shown that it is environmentally sound for us to do so, and we don't require the water, there's no reason we shouldn't.
The reason I'm receptive to this is because it's...
In Victoria, BC's Minister of Environment agrees. If there's no damage to the environment, if the water's just pouring into the ocean, why not sell it?
I guess I put it in the vernacular, when we're all done with it, then to to hold out and say, well, no one else may drink that fresh water, even though we have absolutely no further use for it, doesn't make sense to me.
Colin Beach has 2 years to prove that his plant is safe and that he really does have customers willing to buy the water. Experts say the southwestern United States is running desperately short of water. And because Canada has so much fresh water, the pressure to sell it will become enormous. In the late 1950s, there was an American plan to dam up the entire Rocky Mountain Trench and pipe the water south to California. Now, there is a plan to drain water from the Great Lakes and send it down to the arid states of the Midwest.
The fact of the matter is that the Americans are running short of water in some areas, and they see lots of water in Canada.
Dr. Peter Pierce has been appointed by the federal government to head a nationwide inquiry into Canada's water supply.
There is something about water, something about the mystique of water that makes people react very anxiously about selling it. Now, one of the functions of our inquiry is to try to establish the mood of Canadians, the attitude of Canadians toward that prospect.
The inquiry on federal water policy begins public hearings this fall, but already there is negative reaction to export plans.
Let's sell everything off. That is the British Columbia mentality. Let's sell everything off and nature will provide more. But we've shown ourselves politically unable to manage that situation, and it's been shown to have severe environmental long-term damages.
If people elsewhere in the world need water and we can't supply it, we have a duty to do it.
But the pressure is mounting, and a new government in Ottawa will have to decide if water is just one more renewable natural resource like trees and fish, or if water is something Canada should keep entirely to itself. Jerry Thompson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And let's bring back our meteorologist, Johanna Wagstaffe, with a look at the 5-day forecast. And Joe, the heat warnings have finally ended for Vancouver, but it's not exactly cool out there, is it?
No, it's still above seasonal, Tanya, by a couple of degrees, and that's our forecast through the weekend into early next week. But yes, after 7 days of heat warnings, they have been finally ended for the South Coast. I want to show you a video, though. It's at the top of Mount Waddington. This is a plumber hut. This is after it snowed on June 12th to 19.5 degree temperatures on June 29th. Look at that, how the snow just disappears. The Hakai Institute, Brian Anunis, Peter Neff, and Bill Floyd sharing this. And I'm sure we'll be talking lots more in the weeks to come about what this heat has done to the tops of our mountains. And we are still dealing with those flood warnings. Quick look at those heat warnings once again. We are still seeing them across the BC interior from Prince George all the way down through the southern interior and through the Kootenays, where, as I mentioned, temperatures are in the high 30s. And it's still hot. Saskatchewan high 30s today, 37 in through Regina this afternoon. We're going to see temperatures come down maybe another couple of degrees as we head into Sunday. Notice we're still looking at mid 30s, though, for the Okanagan. And as we head into early next week, still remaining above seasonal, even here in through Metro Vancouver. So we do have a dry and warm forecast still ahead for us. Not a lot of rain as I look at the models across the province. We saw some earlier today up in the northeast, but not getting a lot from Metro Vancouver. And there's our forecast. Also looking for some smoke from those wildfires over the weekend. So far, I see it at high altitude levels, but we'll be watching for mixing. Tanya, that's still an incredibly dry forecast, even if we're not talking, 44. That is still warm for us. So we'll be watching that closely.
And still so early yet in the summer. Thanks so much, Johanna. We'll touch base with you again soon. You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. We are covering the wildfire developments on all platforms, online, on radio, and on TV. Tune into the National tonight for the very latest developments. Thanks for watching. Have a great night and a safe weekend.